My wife blocked me and said girls' trips weren't my business, so I planned revenge and exposed her. I'm Jake, and for the longest time, I believed marriage was like cement. If you mixed it right and gave it time to set, nothing could crack it. 28 years old, married to Emma for 7 years, and I genuinely thought we were bulletproof. We'd survived everything together, sleeping on air mattresses because we couldn't afford a real bed, eating ramen for weeks when money ran tight, arguments that lasted until dawn, and that time I completely forgot our anniversary because I was pulling double shifts at the warehouse. She forgave me that night, wrapped her arms around me at 2 a.m., and whispered, "We're a team, Jake. Always remember that." Those words became my anchor. Emma was incredible. Sharp-tongued, passionate, the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking in. She had opinions about everything and wasn't afraid to share them. Meanwhile, I was the quiet type, steady and predictable. She used to call me her rock and said I kept her feet on the ground when her head was in the clouds. For years, I wore that description like a badge of honor, never understanding it also meant I was easy to overlook. But here's what nobody tells you about marriage. Sometimes the person you love most starts treating you like background noise. It doesn't happen overnight with some dramatic betrayal or explosive fight. Instead, it's like water slowly seeping into cracks in a foundation, freezing and expanding until everything starts to crumble. First, it was her eyes drifting away mid-conversation. Then came the sighs she didn't bother hiding when I asked about her day. Small kindnesses I used to do, packing her lunch, fixing the dripping kitchen faucet, bringing in groceries while she scrolled through social media, all went unnoticed. I kept telling myself she was just stressed, that marriages have rough patches, that this cold spell would pass eventually, but winter stretched on longer than it should have. I remember how she used to touch my shoulder when she walked past me in the hallway. Such a small gesture, but it meant everything. One day, it just stopped. During movie nights, when I'd reach for her hand, she'd flinch like I'd interrupted something sacred. We started sleeping on opposite sides of our king-sized bed with an invisible wall of unspoken resentment between us. I tried everything I could think of. Asked her out for dinner dates, suggested weekend getaways, even simple walks around the neighborhood just to talk. She always had an excuse ready. Too exhausted from work, too many errands to run. Maybe next weekend. Next weekend never came. The inside jokes we used to share disappeared completely. Those knowing looks we'd exchange across crowded rooms became extinct. She smiled more at her phone screen than at me. The worst part wasn't the fighting. It was when we stopped fighting altogether. People assume yelling and screaming means a relationship is falling apart, but silence is the real butcher. We became ghosts haunting a house we'd built together, the same place where we used to dance barefoot in the kitchen at midnight with all the windows open. Then came the smirks. Subtle at first, just quick eye rolls when I'd say something she found stupid. I'd make a comment and she'd purse her lips, glance away like I was some annoying relative she had to tolerate at family gatherings. It stung worse than any direct insult could have. What she didn't say spoke volumes. I could feel her judgment hanging in the air like smoke, making it clear my presence had become a burden she hadn't figured out how to shed yet. One evening, after another day of walking on eggshells, I finally asked the question I'd been dreading. I kept my voice calm and non-confrontational. "Emma, are you happy with us?" She didn't answer right away, just looked at me with those tired eyes and said, "Why do you ask questions when you already know the answers?" That sentence hit me like a physical blow. I nodded, walked out to the garage, and stood there staring at the wall for over an hour, not knowing how to go back inside. There were hundreds of moments like that, each one tiny and seemingly insignificant to anyone watching from the outside. But to me, they were paper cuts that slowly bled me dry. I started walking with my shoulders hunched, speaking quieter, laughing less. I wasn't living anymore, I was just surviving. I'd become the guy who showed up, paid the mortgage, took out the trash on Tuesday mornings. Not a partner, not a lover, just a placeholder keeping the household running. I didn't know how to leave, because leaving felt like admitting defeat. Like breaking the promises I'd made at that altar 7 years ago. For better or worse, right? But nobody explains what you're supposed to do when the worse isn't betrayal or abuse, just slow-burning apathy and contempt, the gradual decay of everything you thought was permanent. Then Emma's sister Victoria moved in after her messy divorce, and everything got 1,000 times worse. Victoria was everything Emma used to be, but amplified. Loud, dramatic, completely self-absorbed. She had no money for a deposit on her own place, no furniture, no timeline for leaving. Most importantly, she had a talent for making every conversation revolve around her personal drama. I watched Emma's entire personality shift when Victoria was around. More laughter, more animated conversations, more inside jokes that deliberately excluded me. In the mornings, I'd pour coffee for Emma and myself, but somehow Victoria got hers first, with whipped cream and cinnamon sprinkles. Mine arrived lukewarm, a small signal that I'd dropped another rung on the priority ladder. Victoria took over my home office for her creative projects and yoga sessions. Her laundry covered our bathroom floor. Her music blasted through the walls until midnight. Her friends showed up unannounced for impromptu wine tastings in our living room. I felt like a stranger in my own house, tiptoeing around someone else's life while my own space disappeared piece by piece. One afternoon, I decided to surprise Emma with takeout from her favorite Thai place. I'd been planning it all day, imagining her face lighting up, maybe getting a genuine smile for the first time in weeks. Instead, I walked in to find Victoria teaching Emma how to decorate cupcakes, flowers in both their hair, laughing about some romantic comedy I'd never heard of. They paused when I entered, acknowledged me with polite nods, then went right back to their bonding session. I ate my pad thai alone at the kitchen counter, listening to their conversation float past me like I wasn't even there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked from room to room, searching for some trace of the home Emma and I had created together. But the house reflected what had already happened. I'd become an extra in my own life, watching from the sidelines as my marriage dissolved in real time. Everything came to a head at Emma's family barbecue 3 months later. Her relatives had never been my biggest fans, but they tolerated me well enough when Emma and I were solid. Now I could feel their indifference like a physical weight. I grabbed a beer from the cooler and tried to blend into the background, but isolation followed me everywhere. Victoria, already wine-drunk by 2 p.m., spotted me hovering near the grill and called out loudly, "Hey Jake, don't look so nervous. I promise nobody's going to bite you." The whole picnic table erupted in laughter. I forced a smile and moved closer, hoping to deflect with small talk. "Everything smells great, Mr. Patterson," I said to Emma's dad, who was manning the grill with his usual serious expression. Victoria patted the bench beside her. "Sit down, Jake. Let's have a real conversation." The way she said real made my stomach clench. I sat down anyway, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. She leaned in close, wine on her breath, and stage whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear. "So, Jake, hypothetically speaking, if Emma ever cheated on you, would you cry?" The question hit the group like a grenade. Laughter exploded from every direction. Emma's cousins, her aunts and uncles, family friends I'd known for years. I sat there holding my beer, face burning, trying to process what had just happened. Someone shouted from across the yard, "She probably already has." Another voice added, "Yeah, what about that trainer at her gym?" The laughter got louder, rolling across the backyard like thunder. I looked toward Emma, hoping for some sign she'd shut this down, defend me, do anything to stop the humiliation. She was sitting in a lawn chair with a glass of white wine, and for just a moment, I saw a small smirk play across her lips. Not embarrassment for my sake, not anger at Victoria's cruelty, but amusement. Like this was exactly the entertainment she'd been waiting for. Then Emma spoke up, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Well, it's not like he's exactly setting any records in bed anyway." The laughter reached a crescendo. People were literally doubling over, wiping tears from their eyes. I felt something cold and sharp slide through my chest, replacing the heat of embarrassment with something much worse. I stood up slowly, set my beer on the picnic table, and looked around at all these people I'd considered family for 7 years. They were having the time of their lives at my expense, treating me like their personal punching bag. Emma's father was chuckling behind the grill. Her mother was covering her mouth, trying to stifle giggles. Victoria looked absolutely delighted with herself. "Message received," I said quietly, but somehow everyone heard me. The laughter died instantly. I met each of their eyes one by one, letting the weight of those 2 words settle over the group. Victoria's grin froze on her face. Emma's smirk disappeared entirely. For about 10 seconds, the only sound was meat sizzling on the grill. I walked toward the side gate, each step deliberate and calm. Emma's mother called out behind me, "Jake, honey, where are you going?" I paused with my hand on the latch and looked back. "Thank you for the hospitality, Mrs. Patterson. Please enjoy the rest of your afternoon." Then I stepped through and kept walking, leaving behind the nervous laughter and awkward silence that had replaced their cruel amusement. I walked 6 blocks to where I'd parked my car, My mind completely clear. For the first time in months, they'd shown me exactly what I meant to them. And I'd finally heard the message loud and clear. I wasn't family. I wasn't even a friend. I was their entertainment, their punching bag, their convenient target whenever they needed someone to mock. That night, while Emma was still at her parents' house, probably rehashing every hilarious moment of my public humiliation, I made a decision that had been building for months. I wasn't going to stick around for the sequel. I woke up at 4:30 a.m., with crystal clear purpose flowing through my veins. I moved through the house, like a ghost, packing 2 large duffel bags with everything I actually needed: clothes, laptop, important documents, the emergency cash I'd been saving without telling Emma. I left a simple note on the kitchen counter. Hoped the joke was worth it. Underneath, I placed the divorce papers I'd had prepared weeks earlier when I finally accepted our marriage was already dead. By 5:15, I was backing out of our driveway for the last time. I drove east toward the mountains, following back roads I'd mapped out during sleepless nights, heading for a cabin I'd rented online using a fake name and prepaid cards. The place was owned by an old guy named Frank, who advertised privacy guaranteed, no questions asked. It felt like destiny. The cabin sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by pine trees and absolute silence. No neighbors, no cell towers, no Wi-Fi, just me and 40 acres of forest. For the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling someone's judgment pressing down on my chest. I set up my laptop on a wooden table by the window and started taking freelance programming jobs. My clients didn't care where I worked, as long as the code got delivered on time. Days fell into a peaceful rhythm. Work until noon, simple lunch, long walks through the woods. I chopped firewood, learned to identify bird calls, read books from Frank's collection. Evenings I cooked basic meals over a camp stove and ate by lamplight, listening to owls and coyotes instead of cruel laughter and whispered insults. For 3 months I lived completely off the grid. No social media, no phone calls, no contact with my previous life. I grew a beard, lost weight from hiking, developed calluses from splitting logs. Most importantly, I remembered who I was before I became Emma's doormat and Victoria's punchline. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I drove to town and checked my old email account from the public library. 67 unread messages, mostly from Emma. The early ones were angry. Running away like a coward won't solve anything. You can't just disappear when things get difficult. This is so typical of you, Jake. But as weeks passed, the tone changed. Desperation crept in. Please, just tell me you're safe. I found the papers. We need to talk about this. Then came attempts at manipulation. Victoria feels terrible about what happened. It was just a joke that went too far. You're being way too sensitive about this. The message that broke my heart was near the end. I've been thinking about us, about what we used to have. Maybe we can fix this. Too little, too late. She'd had 7 years to fix things but chose to stand by while her sister destroyed what little respect I had left. I learned through mutual friends that my disappearance had caused quite the uproar back home. Victoria had to move out when Emma couldn't afford the mortgage alone. Turns out I'd been handling more finances than anyone realized. Emma's father's business hit rough times when he discovered I'd been managing their books for the past 3 years. The whole family was scrambling to untangle financial systems I'd organized and maintained without recognition. Emma sent increasingly frantic messages begging me to return her calls, to help sort out tax documents, to explain where I'd hidden important paperwork. She sold her car to make mortgage payments, moved into a studio apartment, watched their social circle shrink as people chose sides. Victoria became persona non grata among their friends. Turns out people don't like being associated with someone who destroys marriages for entertainment. 6 months after I vanished, Emma tracked down my cabin address somehow and showed up unannounced. I found her on my porch in the middle of a rainstorm, soaked to the bone, clutching a folder of signed divorce papers. Her hair was shorter, she'd lost weight, and her eyes held something I hadn't seen in years, genuine remorse. "Jake," she said, voice barely audible over the rain. "I needed to find you, to say I'm sorry, to tell you face to face that I take full responsibility for destroying the best thing in my life." She held out the folder with shaking hands. "I signed everything. I'm not here to beg you to come back. I'm here because you deserve better than what I gave you, and I needed you to hear me say that." I invited her inside, made coffee, let her talk. She admitted she'd gotten caught up in Victoria's toxic influence, had started seeing me as boring and predictable instead of steady and reliable. The barbecue incident was her rock-bottom moment. Watching me walk away with such quiet dignity while she sat there smirking made her realize what kind of person she'd become. "I spent 7 years with someone who would have moved mountains for me," she said, tears streaming down her face, and I threw it away because I thought I was too good for ordinary love. I thought I deserved excitement and drama instead of loyalty and partnership. I listened without interrupting, then quietly told her what I'd learned during my months alone. "Emma, saying sorry is important, but it doesn't undo the damage. You didn't just hurt me that day. You showed me exactly how little I meant to you for months, maybe years. That barbecue was just the grand finale." She nodded, understanding she wasn't going to get the forgiveness she'd hoped for. We talked for 2 hours about what went wrong, what we'd learned, how we both changed. When the rain stopped, she stood to leave. "I know you'll probably never forgive me," she said at the door. "But I hope someday you'll find someone who appreciates what an incredible man you are. You deserved so much better than what I gave you." After she left, I sat on my porch watching the sun break through the clouds. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete peace with my choices. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter or resentful. I was just free. A year later, I'm still in these mountains, still working remotely, still chopping my own firewood. I've started dating a park ranger named Lisa, who thinks my quiet strength is attractive instead of boring. We take long hikes together, cook simple meals, have conversations that don't require me to compete for attention or approval. Sometimes I think about that barbecue, about the moment everything crystallized for me. Part of me is grateful to Victoria for being so cruel so publicly. It gave me the clarity I needed to save myself. Emma's family inadvertently did me the biggest favor of my life by showing me I deserved better than being their punching bag. The financial devastation back home was even worse than I'd initially heard. Through a mutual friend who stayed in touch, I learned that Emma had to declare bankruptcy within 8 months of my departure. Turns out I'd been quietly managing not just our household finances, but also her father's small construction business and her mother's online boutique. I'd set up their accounting systems, handled their tax preparations, managed their vendor relationships, negotiated their insurance policies. All of this work I'd done for free because family helps family, never asking for recognition or compensation. When I vanished, their entire financial ecosystem collapsed like a house of cards. Emma's father had to hire an expensive accountant who discovered years of disorganized records and missed deductions that cost him thousands in penalties. Her mother's boutique folded completely when she couldn't figure out how to process online orders or manage inventory. The construction business lost 3 major contracts because Mr. Patterson couldn't produce the detailed project timelines and cost analyses I'd been creating behind the scenes. Victoria, meanwhile, had her own reckoning. After being kicked out of Emma's place, she bounced between friends' couches for months. Her social media presence, once full of carefully curated party photos and sarcastic commentary, devolved into increasingly desperate posts about fake friends and family betrayal. The same people who used to enable her drama grew tired of her victim complex. She eventually moved back in with her elderly parents, a 42-year-old woman reduced to sleeping in her childhood bedroom. But the most devastating consequence was what happened to Emma's relationship with her extended family. The barbecue incident had exposed something ugly in their family dynamic, their willingness to gang up on an outsider for entertainment. After I left, other family members started examining their own behavior more critically. Emma's cousin Michael, who'd been one of the loudest voices mocking me that day, later told people he felt sick thinking about it. He'd liked me, considered me a good guy, but got caught up in the mob mentality. This self-reflection created fractures in the family unity they'd always prided themselves on. Arguments broke out at subsequent gatherings about what had really happened, who was responsible, whether they owed me an apology. Emma found herself defending me to the same people who'd laughed at her cruel joke, which created an impossible psychological position. She couldn't admit their behavior was wrong without acknowledging her own culpability, but she couldn't defend their actions without accepting that she'd married into a family of bullies. The guilt ate at her in ways I only learned about much later. She developed insomnia, lost 15 pounds, started seeing a therapist who helped her understand how she'd been emotionally abusing me through neglect and contempt. The therapist apparently told her that watching someone you claim to love get humiliated without intervening is a form of psychological cruelty. Emma had never thought of herself as cruel before, thoughtless, maybe selfish occasionally, but not deliberately harmful. When we talked at the cabin, she said something I'll never forget. "I used to think I was the sufferer in our marriage because I felt bored and overlooked, but now I see I was the hunter. I chipped away at your spirit and told myself it was your fault for being too sensitive, too needy, too plain. I turned you into my emotional punching bag and then blamed you for not fighting back hard enough. She had also uncovered things I'd never told her. After I left, she went through old emails and files and found proof of how often I'd supported her quietly, never asking for thanks, like the time I paid her student loan bill when she couldn't but pretended the lender had made a mistake, or how I'd been saving money each month to surprise her on our 10th anniversary, or the job recommendations I wrote under her boss's name, because I knew she wouldn't accept help if she knew it came from me. I thought you were just there, she admitted, like wallpaper or a chair, always around, always steady. Nothing I had to think about. I never saw how much you were actually doing to keep our lives together, or how much you gave up to keep me happy. Instead of being grateful, I resented you because you made it all look easy. That talk also brought something else to light. Emma had been living with depression for years, but refused to admit it or get help. The irritability, the coldness, the cruel words, those weren't just flaws. They were symptoms. And the way she coped was by dumping her pain on the safest person she had, me, the one who loved her no matter what and would take the blows without walking away. I know that doesn't excuse what I did, she said, but I want you to understand I was drowning. Instead of asking for help, I tried to drag you under with me. I didn't plan it, but that doesn't make it less damaging. You deserved someone who lifted you up, not someone who used you to carry all their pain. After she walked out that day, I spent weeks trying to make sense of everything she had said. Part of me felt justified. At last, someone had admitted what I had gone through was real. But another part of me felt sorrow for both of us. We were stuck in a loop. Her untreated struggles weighed down the relationship, and my habit of avoiding conflict let the damage go on and on. I never learned if Emma really had an affair with her trainer, and I realized it didn't matter. The betrayal was already clear. She let her family mock me, even joined in and cared more about keeping her sister entertained than protecting my dignity. That told me everything about where I stood in her life. Now, when people ask about the divorce, I keep it simple. We drifted apart, wanted different things, and split as friends. No need to spill the messy details or chase revenge. The best payback is living well, and I'm finally doing that. Emma's burden is knowing she ruined something lasting for something shallow, and that's hers to live with. Lisa, my girlfriend who works as a park ranger, knows the whole story. She listened without judging, asked smart questions, and helped me work through the anger and pain I'd been holding on to. She said something that opened my eyes. You weren't just married to Emma, you were married to her whole toxic family. Leaving her meant leaving all of them too. She was right. I wasn't just Jake the husband. I was Jake the family accountant, Jake the punching bag, Jake the workhorse they could dump on. My whole sense of self had been swallowed by their dysfunction. No wonder I felt lost for so long before I found the courage to walk away. I kept the cabin, by the way. Bought it from Frank when he retired to Arizona. It's my permanent home now, a safe space where no one can mock me or treat me like a joke. Here, the only opinion that counts is mine, and the only approval I need is from the face I see in the mirror each morning. The place has turned into a retreat for me and Lisa. We host her co-workers for camping trips, share dinners with friends who value kind talk instead of cruel jokes. I've learned to trust my gut again, to notice warning signs early, and to step away from people who don't bring peace into my life. Sometimes I think back to that barbecue, the moment everything became clear. Oddly, I'm thankful Victoria was so harsh in front of everyone. It gave me the push I needed to save myself from years of slow, quiet misery. In a strange way, Emma's family gave me the greatest gift. They showed me I was worth more than being their target. Looking back, I see how I allowed their behavior by never setting limits, never calling them out, never asking for the same respect I gave them. I confused being useful with being valued. I thought their tolerance meant acceptance when in truth it was just convenience. So that's my story. A family barbecue turned into the spark for the best choice I ever made. Sometimes the worst day of your life leads straight into the best days of your real life. You just have to be brave enough to step through the gate and keep walking until you find where you truly belong.